Um, Okay, perfect. Welcome everyone to our virtual job search series. Today we have junior faculty discussing interviewing and all the other questions that everyone has submitted. I have this slide up. If you didn't register, you can do so with the link or the QR code below, and then we'll have like an evaluation survey at the end too to fill out, and then give everyone a minute to get that before I go to the next slide. And then today is the interviewing tips and tricks session. And then we do have future sessions with dates and times to be determined. So keep an eye out for those. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm the moderator. My name is Manisha Singh. I'm in my last year of fellowship. And then I will hand it over to the didactic speaker, Erin Bergner.
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Bergner. I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I did both my residency and fellowship at Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital. I'm currently an associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Oklahoma, and I'm the NICU Fellowship Program Director there. We're a level 4 academic NICU, and my scholarly interests include professional development, program administration, and also neonatal nutrition and human milk. And there's my email in case anyone has any questions after. I would be happy to answer them.
Erin, do you have slides that you wanted to share? Okay. No, you're fine. If I think I can hand it over to you, or if you just click share, it should. Or I'll stop sharing mine and then.
Slides up really.
And I forgot to mention, if anyone has questions, feel free to type in the chat, or just feel free to like raise your hand and ask away during the panelist session.
You guys seeing the right screen? All right, well, thank you all for coming to the talk today. We're gonna talk about the interview and the interview day and how to master your next move in the interview process. So in the components of our day today, I was going to go through the preparation before the interview day, including self-assessment and organizational research in there. Then we'll talk about the elements of the interview day, including your preparation for the questions, and then some tips and tricks for accomplishing the job talk within the interview day. And then we'll also go through post-interview communication do's and don'ts as well. So before we do that, I wanted to take a minute to just acknowledge that I know some of you may be feeling stressed in this process, and that feeling stressed is normal. It's okay to feel overwhelmed because of medical training. We're raised in systems of matching and thinking of our adult life in only 3 to 4 year increments. But this is the system that the rest of the world uses and for the job hunt, and you'll be able to adapt to it too. You're a qualified and highly trained professional, and you can do this, and you're in the right place to get the tools that you need to succeed. So first we'll talk about preparation for the interview day. And we'll spend a lot of time here because, as the saying goes, success is where preparation and opportunity meet. In this portion of the talk, I'll take you through some tools that you can use to ensure that you put your best foot forward on the interview day. The first tool is a honest self-assessment. We spent so much time just hoping to get to the next stage of our career and training without the precise ability to control exactly where we end up through the matching process. Now is finally the time you get to take a good look at yourself in the mirror and assess what you want in the next stage of your career. There's many ways to do this. I recommend using one of the many tools out there that you've probably accessed through your years of training to do some self-assessments on yourself. It's nice to have an external source to validate where you've landed and how you currently view things. Some of these tools might be the things like pulling out the Myers-Briggs personality assessment tools, or using tools such as the DISC personality test to assess your communication style and how you relate with other people. The PACE palette is a great one to assess your temperament and understand how it might interact with the different types of temperaments that you encounter. There's great tools out there for looking at your leadership style. There's the ones that relate to what kind of animal you are and stuff, and it can at least be a fun way. And then some values assessments to try to help you kind of center in, because a lot of the job, as we'll talk about, is centering in on what values and things that you find important in your career. All of these can only help you in helping determine your really knowing yourself and knowing what you want, and nothing else. They're fun and can give you some good words to describe yourself throughout the interview journey. Um, from here, you'll need to do a little bit of homework in the process too. Many trainees express feelings that they kind of live in the microcosms of their institutions and in their training programs, and they have a difficult time understanding what else is out there. I wanted to point out to you some recent publications to help you in this process. So here in this highlighted study, they surveyed early career neonatologists on topics such as practice sites, being a university-based or non-university based, and looked at things like scheduling models, compensation, benefits, and promotion. It's a great picture of the types of models available out there that might not be similar or dissimilar to the ones that you are currently experiencing. The same group also evaluated factors influencing compensation of early career neonatologists, and it contains a means to find easy information on salary ranges, which is probably one of the most common questions trainees have. Exactly how much should I be expected to be paid? And this is a great source available easily in the literature to give you some access to that information. There's also resources such as this one to describe the many ways that you could progress in your career as a neonatologist. Not only does it discuss university versus non-university based practice models and opportunities, but it also describes the different types of academic career pathways and what they entail. This is something that's all relatively unknown to trainees, even though you've been in an academic institution most of your medical training life. But it can really give you a better picture of what you might want in a career and what you might need to ask for as you go through this interview journey as well. So once you've taken the time to educate yourself on these items, you're ready for the next tool, which is defining your ideal position. While this is not an exhaustive list, I've outlined several of the major areas of things for you to think about in this process. So take some time to look at each one of them in the clinical practice realm, your academic opportunities, your compensation, and benefits desires, family life, growth, and work environment considerations. And then consider each one and think what you would prefer in each area. For example, what leadership style do you thrive best under, and do you have aspirations to take on a leadership position as well? Then you can decide, as you go through each of them, you can decide how much value you want to place on it. Um, then do the same thing, have individuals you trust go through and do the same things with you. Have your significant others or your mentor walk through this process with you, and it'll help elucidate which factors you think will be the key drivers in defining your ideal position. Remembering that it is a bit like car shopping. There's lots of different jobs out there, and they have different aspects to them, and they might not all have exactly what you want. So just like there's many trims and packages, at some point you might have to decide if the sunroof or that heated steering wheel are going to be their deal breakers, or which one's more important to you. So having this in advance is going to help you decide that as you're out on the interview trails as well. From there, you can move to tool 3 and start developing your 5-year plan. Before you groan and roll your eyes at me, I wanted to discuss the importance of this 5-year plan and how it differs from just setting annual career goals. Because there's a reason that highly successful people swear by this tool as well. And unlike a 1-year plan, it by design is a bigger picture and more longitudinal in nature. So it makes you focus on your transferable skills versus skills that are just skills that are needed for your current role. So it's adaptable to future life. It also increases fulfillment and motivation in your current role and helps you decrease on path deviations and being distracted from things that don't align with your ultimate purpose and career path. It also, for your future employer, it increases perceived employability and a connection to that purpose that you're trying to convey. Plus, many potential employers will actually ask for your 5-year plan, so you might as well have one ready in your preparation process. So now that I have you convinced that it might be a good idea, here are the key steps to developing those plans. So the first one is to brainstorm. Take a minute to look at your primary goals and your passions and think, what can I improve on and what skills might I need to develop? From there, go outside of yourself and gather feedback. Talk to others, particularly your mentors or your direct supervisors. They can and ask them questions like, in order to grow in my career, what behaviors do you think I should develop, or which behavior should I leave behind? What's one skill that you would recommend I master to get to the next level in my career? And then from there, you can start mapping it out. Take all that information that you just received and start outlining your career goals, and then write down developmental activities that you might want to pursue to help develop those goals. Those can be things like joining a committee, what webinars you'd want to attend, shadowing someone that is on a pathway that is something that you want to attain, taking courses, reading books, attending conferences, seeking certain types of mentorship to develop skills that you would like, but that you currently don't have. Even doing things like serving on a nonprofit board or embarking in certain supervisory roles in order to gain some skills and experiences that you don't currently have can be great things to help you along that career trajectory. A pro tip in trying to look for some of these ideas on what could be included in your career plan is to look at your current institutional's promotion criteria. It often has things, types of things that should be included. And if they're included in your 5-year plan to meet personal goals and personal career goals and also get you promoted at the same time, it's a win-win. One great tool in outlining this 5-year plan is to use something called a Gantt chart, which is used for project management. There's tons of online tools and templates out there. I just took a screenshot of one of them for you. And it's a great way to show your future employer that you've put some thought into your future development in your professional career. And then the final step in making that 5-year plan is to iterate. So remember that your plan can change. It's flexible because it centers on your core values and it can be adjusted throughout your career. So just because you put one thing down in your career plan, your 5-year plan, it doesn't mean that has to be the same. I'm 6 years out from graduating fellowship, and the plan I laid out is definitely not the same that it is today, and the path took differences from whether it was because there were certain barriers that reached or certain things that changed in my personal life that changed my focus a bit. That's okay. And I was able to have a path and have a open conversation with my section chief and those that supervise me, and ultimately I have continued to stay with in line with my values, and I'm probably happier for it. So don't be afraid to put something on paper and know that it might change in the future. So the final tool to kind of have in your back pocket is the develop an elevator pitch about yourself. So this is a short and sweet way to 30-second way to sell yourself, and isn't adaptable to many situations. So it can be used at things like a networking event or just during a spontaneous encounter where you meet someone. It's a good framework for planning. It's also a good framework for planning your answers to the question of the ever popular "Tell me about yourself" question. The key components to that pitch are: you want to convey who are you, what do you want to do, what do you want, and then end with a call to action. That call to action at the end can be something as simple as when can we set up a time to meet, or I'd love to hear more about these things with you. Some keys to successfully develop the elevator pitch are to focus on your impact, not necessarily how long you've been doing something, but what are your results. Personalize it to the conversation at hand. So if you have some varying areas to talk about, bring up the one piece of information that you want that particular person to know. Pace yourself. If you rush through it, since you've practiced it, then it might not feel genuine or natural. And express confidence. If you're nervous and talking to people, or giving this pitch about yourself, try reversing the roles. If you were the person being pitched to, you'd probably likely happily listen and help the person pitching to you as best you could, and realize that we're in a career of many people, like-minded people. So that can give you confidence going forth. And lastly, practice. It's a good way to memorize it as a general outline, and then you can use it in any situation that you might find it useful. So now that we've kind of gone through most of the preparation, I wanted to take you through the major components of the interview day. Um, And within there will be, again, some more preparation that you can talk about through the questions, but I wanted to do it within the context of what you might encounter. So the main interview components are many job interviews at this stage actually start with a screening or a telephone interview. Those are typically with the division chiefs or section chief in academic practices, or the medical director in non-academic practices. It's a really good time to learn about the position and see if there's something that you would like to pursue further. It's also a great opportunity to ask if there's any particular skill sets that they're looking to fill in their practice and develop. So you can then use that information to tailor your plans and thought processes for the actual interview day. This is also a point that it's completely okay to, as you learn more about the position and it doesn't sound like something that aligns well with what you want, is to say that you're not interested or you need more time after having this conversation. Um, it's an investment on both sides to recruit someone, and so people will appreciate your honesty as well. So if you do, after the screening interview, decide that this is something that you would like to pursue, um, and you're offered an interview, that means that they've done an assessment of your qualifications, and they think that you have something to offer. And so really this is it's a wonderful sign, and to look at it as an opportunity to learn more. So within the interview day, they're typically 1 to 2 days interviews, depending on the organization. For the actual day of the interview, your attire should be business professional. And then often they include a dinner where you, which might be a little bit more casual, so you can get to know people in a less formal setting. And you can probably be business casual for those. The third and final component might be a job talk with within your interview day. This doesn't necessarily happen in all interviews, and not everyone is asked to do them, but we'll talk through the components of how you can be successful in doing that as well. And then the second interview, again, is one of those things that may or may not occur. It's often a time in which, if you're strongly considering a position and you didn't get to bring your family to a new location, might be a place where you can bring your family, visit with a realtor, see what a lot more about the location, and then get to get some of those questions answered that you might have had lingering after your first interview day. So when you're going into the interview day, it's important to remember that this is all a two-way street. So employers are looking to determine if you're the appropriate fit for the job and for their culture, and you're trying to decide if that environment is right for you and the best place for you to succeed. So the first thing you can do to prepare yourself for the interview day is to really practice answers to those common interview questions. Take a moment and from all your prior prep work to list your traits and skills, look at how they align with the organization, and use this information to create your story. I've listed some here that are kind of some common interview questions, and I know through your registration and filling out the final survey of this, you also, this series will provide you with many, many interview questions that you can go through and practice as well. As you're doing that, your main thing to think about is telling a story within them. When you think through questions, come up with some just general good examples that are adaptable to many different questions of both accomplishments and pitfalls from your past experiences that you can utilize to answer questions. In a concise manner. People remember stories. So you want to be able to say it in a concise and impactful manner that they're going to remember after you leave the interview day. Having thought through these in advance makes it less likely that you'll have some personal processing of an emotion during the time that the question is presented. Nobody wants to talk about a time that they failed, but if you think about it in advance, you're going to be able to convey it in a manner that says more about who you are. And in actuality, your full goal in any of these interview questions is to really convey your purpose to the person that is interviewing you and tell them who you are. And so if you can tell a story to do that, you will automatically be on a higher footing. The other thing to think about is what kind of questions you will ask. You should always have something ready when someone asks the question, do you have any other questions for me? Feel free to bring a list with you and open it up and refer to it. And you can ask the same question of multiple interviewers. And some questions are good to ask of multiple interviewers because you can see if they're consistent or if there's different perspectives gained. Some areas that you might want to focus on are listed over here on the side for you. First, practice structure are easy kind of questions. What types of team structures do they have? How many patients? What type of acuity do they see? What is the call schedule like? Just to give you a better picture of what your day-to-day life would be like. You also really want to try to assess the culture fit between the institution and you. You're going to spend a lot of time there, and you want to know that you'll be happy in the environment that you're in. So you can do this in more serious manners by saying, how would you describe your institution's values? Or you can ask questions that are a little bit more fun, like, what's your favorite office tradition? Any of those are going to give you a great assessment of what that institution in that particular workplace is like. You also want to assess the stability. Is this a new practice, or does it have a proven record of stability? Does it have strong ties to the community that are going to continue to strengthen it through the years that you're there? Of course, looking at location, are there entertainment and cultural attractions that are conducive to what you want for your lifestyle? What's the housing situation? How's it going to affect your cost of living? Those are all great questions to ask a variety of people. In addition, looking for the resources available in terms of research, education, quality improvement, and safety resources. Do you have access to data and best practice guidelines through this work location? And do they encourage clinicians to participate in research studies and publish if that's something that you're interested in? The practice network is also a great thing to ask about. Is it a group that has a single location, or do you have the opportunity to work at several different sites um, through this particular job? Compensation and benefits are generally something that are going to be included in your interview day, normally through a business manager or HR representative. But if you get to the end of your interview day and you have not been given this information, it is okay to ask how you might be receiving it or what form you might expect some information in. But it is generally not the best to lead with these types of questions, as the employer is looking for more of a fit with you. The other important thing to consider in your preparation for answering these questions and asking these questions is consider who you're going to ask them of. You're going to meet many different people through your interview day. And some questions are more appropriate for some people than others. So it's important to research those people that are interviewing you. So there are certain questions to ask of the medical director. There are certain questions that are better to ask junior faculty. The other thing to consider is what their worldview might be. If you understand how that interviewer sees the world, you're going to be able to communicate with them better and answer questions in a manner that speaks to them and sell yourself more appropriately. One great example of this is to pay attention to generational differences. It's important for you to interview with people from many generations within your workplace to get really a flavor of who you might be working with and what the values are. But people do have different values and communication styles and motivations that are somewhat dependent on their generation. So knowing how those interact and thinking through them can help you relate to them better. For example, baby boomers are often described as optimistic, competitive. They're often workaholics and team oriented. And so asking them questions about how you can be a part of the team and be productive. They're loyal to their company and teamwork. And so those types of questions are going to appeal from them. On the same vein, knowing their different communication styles and that you might be in a different generation helps you avoid some pitfalls too. Many people in Generation Z that many of you are a part of, have grown up with technology their whole life and you looking at their phone for their agenda or whatever they might need, or referencing for interview questions that you have written down as a part of everyday life. But someone that's in Gen X or a baby boomer might view that as you're aloof or not taking this interview seriously. So take a look at some of those and think about that a little bit in your interview day, and it'll help guide you in how best to communicate with all the individuals that you interact with during the day. So with that, I just wanted to summarize a couple interview strategies and tips that we've gone through. So focus on the process, not the result. If you focus on your preparation and presenting yourself in the best light, you eventually will get a job offer. And the things in your preparation and how you present yourself are the things that you can control. And if you put good effort into doing those things, you will succeed. Ensure that you utilize effective communication and engagement techniques, and then ensure that you emphasize your achievements, convey enthusiasm, ask insightful questions, and then seek feedback throughout the process. And I just want to take a minute, aside from the interview questions and your interactions with individuals, to talk about the job talk. Again, as I mentioned before, it's not a component of every interview, but it definitely is an uncommon thing to be asked to do during an interview day. Remember that your job talk is your chance to showcase your accomplishments, your communication style or your teaching style to a wider body of people that you may or may not meet through the interview day. It's often to the entire practice group or section that you're speaking to. And so it's kind of your first impression to many of those people. It may be research oriented if you're looking for an academic or research position, but if you're looking for a more clinically based, it could be a clinical topic or a education topic, depending on your primary focus. In developing it prior to your interview day, as you often don't know exactly how long it would be, my advice would be to aim for about 45 minutes. That way, if you're given an hour, you have a nicely lengthened talk and then have a decent amount of time at the end for questions. But if they only ask for a 30-minute time slot, you have something that's within a reasonable range that you can shore up and shorten for that particular situation. Many times these talks can be adapted from things that you have been given in fellowships regarding your research or clinical teaching cases as well. The most important thing within that is to not forget to end your slides discussing how your plan can translate to your experiences or in your new position. We're used to ending our research presentations with the conclusions of our study, but the conclusion of this talk is how you can translate those skills from that you've learned in your accomplishments to their organization and in your new position. And so it's a really great way to make your stamp on how you would like to be perceived in your career going forward. Just a couple tips on the actual slide presentations on those. It's important to pay attention to your fonts. You want to use large and sans serif fonts. Remember that you're looking for readability in there. Your headings should be at least 40 points in fonts, and your text should be at least 30 points in font too. So if you're finding yourself having to shrink your fonts to get more information on it, resist that urge and instead tighten your thinking and try to make yourself more concise, and it'll make your presentation a lot smoother and readable for your audience. When you're thinking about colors, make sure that you use high contrast combinations. Try to keep it to a limited amount of colors, 2 to 3 colors with a contrasting like a dark to a light background and a light to a dark background are much more effective and draw the viewer's eye to where you want them to be. You should use pictures selectively. They should be bold and have a purpose, and shouldn't be in there just as eye candy for your viewer to help convey what you're trying to show. And then pay attention to your layout. You should really be aiming for simplicity to help to guide your viewers through your message. So with that, you've finished the interview day and you're nearly to the next steps. There are just a few things to pay attention after the communication, after the interview. The next steps are to do follow-up communication. A thank you note is always recommended. You'd be surprised how many people don't necessarily send it though, but this is a great way to convey your interest to a future employer. It can be short and sweet. Email to the section chief or medical director after the interview, the day after the interview day. Mentions one thing that was specific about your interview or what you learned about the organization. Mention that you look forward to hearing from them. The follow-up note is for when you've just after you've established a time frame in which you would hear about their decision on whether or not they would like to hire you, and you might not have heard, it is okay to follow up with them. Many of these people are very busy, and there's a complex system in play. My advice is to give some people grace. If it's been about a week after that normal time frame that they've talked to you about and you still haven't heard anything, it's okay to contact them, and just send them an email that says continuing to express your interest and excitement, say something positive about their organization, and ask if there's any additional information that you can provide. Often that helps jog some people into action and giving you some further information. Interval contact in between those 2 points is really only if there's a significant change in your situation or your CV. So an example of that would be that you've gotten another job offer in the meantime, but you would really want to hear from them before. That's something that a future employer is going to want to know as well. And then finally, if you are in the unfortunate situation that you didn't get an offer on that job, it's okay to ask for feedback. You can send a quick note asking for constructive feedback for your interview. Just be brief. You may or may not get a response, but it could lead to a great tip, or it could lead to them seeing you in a slightly different light as well. So with all this information, you'll just want to take some time after the interview and sending out that communication to self-reflect. You want to review notes that you've taken during the day, and think about questions like, does the position align with your core values? And do you think this will set you up well for a transition? Were you able to connect with the people that you met during that day? And also take the time to assess for red flags. Was there an unorganized or clear process? Did you get inconsistent answers about culture? Was anyone disengaged in conversation with you or speaking poorly about previous employees? Those are red flags in the situation. You want to see transparency throughout the day and have met individuals from across the organization. So to summarize, and just walk you through the steps that we've walked through in this presentation. So first, preparation is key. You should research that organization. You should know yourself, and practice thoroughly on questions that you want to ask and answer during the interview day. Once you're in the interview day, you want to highlight your unique skills, emphasize experience and achievements that set you apart, and connect to your audience with stories. And then finally, follow up, seek next steps and feedback, and then self-reflect and utilize your support work to make your decision. So with that, I leave you with the skills that you need to succeed in your interview day. Above all, remember that this is just the next step in your already successful career, and you're ready for this. And we have our panel now, and look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen again so I can. Okay, and then I will present it so we can start going through the panelists. I'm not sure if you're seeing, oh, there we go. Okay, so we will have our interviewing panel now. I'll just have everyone introduce themselves as I go to your slide.
Hey everyone, I'm Tanya Branch. I am a first-year faculty member at Lurie Children's and Northwestern in Chicago, and this is actually where I did my fellowship as well. I'm originally from the Dallas area, and Lurie and Northwestern are level 3 and 4 NICUs that we cover, so we're in downtown Chicago. And my career interests and academic interests are in perinatal health inequities and implementation science. So essentially taking the information that we know about inequities in perinatal outcomes and applying those to interventions in the community to help mitigate those inequities. So happy to be here today.
Thank you. It's great to have you.
Hi guys, I'm Kara Beth Carr. I'm originally from Clinton, North Carolina. I did my residency at UH Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, and I stayed there for fellowship as well. I'm currently an assistant professor at UNC, finishing up my first year as an attending there. We're in an academic setting, and my main career and scholarly interests are medical education and point of care ultrasound. Very happy to be here.
Thank you. Happy to have you here. Sorry, I'm just having some difficulties really quick. Okay.
All right. Hi, I'm John Feaster. I grew up in Cincinnati, kind of hopped around for training, as you can see on the screen, but ultimately came back and just finished my first year as faculty here at Cincinnati Children's. It's a large academic level 4 center with a little bit of we also cover all the other smaller NICUs in the region as well. So I get to see the whole range of neonatology. My scholarly focus is on health policy and how we can use health policy to address neonatal health inequities. Happy to talk about any of those topics.
Thank you. And then Angelina June, she, I believe, is not able to introduce herself, so I will just introduce her for everyone. So she's from Rockville, Maryland, did her residency in Eastern Virginia Medical School, her fellowship at University of Virginia. She's currently finishing her first year as an attending in private practice at a large level 4 NICU in the Northern VA area. Her interests include hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, POCUS, and global health, and her email is also at the bottom. So we'll go ahead and go for our questions. These were questions that were submitted to us that we put in a PowerPoint slide. So I'll just read some of them and then we can just have you all answer. So what should I spend time preparing for and what should I not stress about?
I would say that you should spend time preparing for those general standard interview questions in case you get asked those questions that were reviewed in the more didactic portion. There's also a really wonderful website, Neonatology Solutions, that has a career planning section where you can go through and see different example questions for a variety of individuals you may interview with, like the medical director, your division chief. And I would spend time really preparing your elevator pitch and how to sell yourself, because that's really going to be what the majority of your day is, to be able to show who you are, what you've done in the last 3 years of your training, where you are right now, and how you feel like you can benefit the division and the department as a whole. And also trying to extract information so that you can leave getting a good sense of whether or not you feel like it's still a good fit for you. And what not to stress about. I mean, I don't think you need to stress about some of the like nitty gritty things. I think that usually these conversations are a little bit more like big picture, but as far as like what you want to do, they're not going to say where do you want to be in 5 years and then hold that to you. So I think a lot of it is painting that story of who you are and what you hope and expect to accomplish and how that can fit in with the division that you're talking to.
I agree with that. I think that in terms of like what to prepare for, as Kara said, the questions of like what you're actually looking for in a place, I think that it was really helpful for me to actually sit down and write down the goals I had for myself and the type of environment I wanted to be in, what I wanted to work on. even looking at potential people that I may want to work with or have as mentors was really helpful, because then as I had the first interview and setting up the second interview in person, I was able to say, is it possible for me to meet with, XYZ people that I might want to work with as part of my mentorship team? And then it also helped me think about additional questions to ask when I was actually physically present there, in terms of how things are set up and how that might help me develop my career as I wanted to. And then I guess the other thing I would add about what not to stress about in theory is like some of the logistics of the interview, like setting up your hotel and your flight and all of that, which I think may come up for us in later questions or at other panels. But in theory, this job interview process is different from the fellowship process, and oftentimes you should be recruited, and so places should be working with you to set up your flights and your hotels. And I didn't realize how much of a relief that was to not have to also think about what I'm going to say, but also figure out like my rental car and where I'm going to sleep the night before and all of that. So they should be helping you do that.
Yeah, I would really echo Tanya's and Kara's point about really taking time to understand what you want and not kind of what your mentors have told you that you should want, or like what you've seen other fellows do, but like really drill down like what would make me happy, right? And then like figure out like what actually makes you happy. Is it going and getting a grant? Is it to perform to answer some research question that you have, or is it, being present on clinical rounds and teaching? And really just the deeper you drill into that exact thing of like what really makes you tick and not just what you've done in fellowship, the better your interviews will go, because you're going to come off as engaged and authentic.
Thank you. The next two questions we kind of touched on, but I think it's interesting. The second to last question, what are big turnoffs to avoid that you have seen while interviewing candidates?
I don't think I'm the best person to speak on this, because since I'm a first year, I haven't been on this side long enough to really speak on that as much.
Surprisingly, I interviewed one person. And I think, well, a couple of people, I guess, not having questions to ask, which I think Erin had mentioned in her talk, but it's a little awkward when you're kind of sitting there and you feel like you've got your questions as an interviewer to ask, and someone doesn't have like any questions. It just, you kind of sit there and, it just becomes a little awkward. So have some questions to ask.
I can jump in a little bit because I interview a lot of people to I think some of those things I mentioned, like just like Tanya said, you should always have an answer to the "do you have any questions" answer. And then just some of the I wouldn't say necessarily turnoffs, but things that make you question is when people don't have an example to bring forth on things to answer, normally when people ask you a question, it's they know that it's something like we've all failed at something, we've all have weaknesses too. And so not being able to bring it up or come up with an example for something just shows a little bit of a lack of insight into it too. So that's why I'm trying to think through some of those examples in advance so you can just bring them up when they're called on. It just helps you come out in a better light.
And then the other question in this preparing for interviews and logistics is, how different is the interview for private practice versus academic jobs?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Tanya.
Oh, I was going to say, I think the biggest difference I felt was because I interviewed at both. And I was a little unclear if I was going to go the academic route because my research interests were also a little more like advocacy community interests. And I found that interviewing at the private practices, there was just a lot less interest generally or questions about my academic work. Not to say that they didn't care, but it just wasn't what I would be doing at those practices. And so, while I could talk about my experiences with that, there just generally seemed to be less of a need for me to like pitch all of, the work that I had done in that way. And the focus was a little more clinical or sort of how I would envision myself being a part of the team. Potentially, if there's committees and things like that, they were interested if I would want to be a part of that, or maybe some QI initiatives or, things like that. But most of the conversation centered on why I wanted to be in the area, like the actual like area city wise, and then what sort of coverage models I had been used to learning in fellowship and sort of levels of independence and things like that, and less about the academic work. And from the academic side, there was obviously a lot more interest in what I wanted to do, what kind of research, if I was interested in pursuing certain academic tracks, funding, et cetera. And so, yeah, I think those were like my biggest differences.
Great, thank you. And then just going back to the middle two questions, I feel like we've already touched on this, but if anyone has anything to add, the differences between first and second interviews, and what is the main difference between fellowship and faculty interviews?
I feel like the first interview is more of the general screening interview, so you can figure out what gap they're trying to fill to see if you have those skills or interest in filling whatever gap they're looking for in their division. And then likewise, they're looking to see if you're a good fit for their division. And then the second interview, like the in-person interview, you meet a lot of people in those 2 days. You're meeting like a lot of people throughout the division and throughout the department. And if you are interested, and Tanya touched on this, like if you are interested in working with certain people, or you envision yourself partnering with certain people, either within the division or outside of the division, that I feel like those conversations often happen at the second interview, in the in-person. So that way you can get a general sense of, if I'm here working on a project or starting research, who am I going to be meeting with, and how would that collaboration potentially?
Yeah, I think with regards to the difference between the fellowship and faculty interviews, it seems more so in a fellowship interview, you're really trying to get a sense of what that program can offer you and like what skills you're going to build while you're there. And that emphasis is still there in the faculty interview, but it also kind of starts to track back towards you about like, what are you going to build? What are you bringing? And what's your vision for like how you're going to help the division grow? So it's a little bit more of like a give and take than the fellowship interview.
Yeah, and to build on that, fellowship is 3 years long. So you may be thinking of things a little bit more like short term whenever you're interviewing for fellowship. But a lot of people who are interviewing for faculty positions are thinking more long term. So just thinking, like, is this somewhere I'm still going to want to be in 5 years? Can I still see myself here? So that kind of mindset can be a little bit different, fellowship versus faculty interviews too.
I'll add to that for the differences from private practice to academic too, that's something I noticed is that the private practices, at least that I interviewed at, a lot of the people in the practice had been there for a really long time. So they don't have as much turnover as some other academic jobs might, or some other private practices. So something to think about as you're, they're looking for someone who's going to be there for a long time, who's invested, and will want to grow with the practice.
And Angie had also mentioned in the chat that for her private practice job interview, she did not have to give a job talk. So that's a big difference between the two as well.
I think I'm finally at like a quieter spot. So just to jump off of that, I think for private practice interviews, if the physicians have been there for a long time, I think that's only a positive of the group. If it's a group with a lot of turnover, I would caution that as a red flag. The only other thing I wanted to mention was that for in terms of crafting a story, make sure that story is relevant, like both academic and clinical wise. I think in med school residency and fellowship, we try to make ourselves unique by talking about our hobbies. Like, I collect sneakers, or I'm a bouldering champion. I would say tamp down on that for job interviews, because they don't care much, like they don't care about that as much as I think in the past, when it might have made you stand out. They care more about your clinical soundness and how you will contribute to that division as an academic neonatologist or as a clinical neonatologist.
Great, thank you so much. Our next group of questions is kind of based on like marketing yourself. So what is the best way to market yourself for both private practice and academic jobs? How did you craft your elevator pitch, and how can you ensure that your goals for yourself are heard?
I feel like marketing yourself for both private practice and academic jobs, you do need to have, and this kind of goes along with the second question, you need to have a slightly different elevator pitch for private practice versus academic jobs, because your position is going to be different. So if you're trying to market yourself for a certain position, those are inherently going to be different. And in private practice, you're really going to be focusing on your clinical abilities and your interests, like in the area and their practice model. And for academic jobs, they usually will want you to be productive in some way. And so also marketing yourself and making sure they understand how you plan on contributing to the academic mission of the division of the department, and how you plan on being productive while you're there. So I think that making sure that you're able to define those things for both of the different settings will be important. As far as how did I craft my elevator pitch, I just thought about what I had been doing, what I wanted to say about myself, and what I feel like I could bring to the division. As Aaron mentioned, I kind of had a go-to like 60-second-ish elevator pitch. I had a lot of people listen to it, and then I would tweak it based on where I was. So I would usually try to find something about the institution I was interviewing where I could say, one of the reasons why I'm really interested in this institution is because of X. And so identify the thing that is really bringing me to that institution, and why I'm interested in that particular place, and make that interest reflect back on the earlier part of my elevator pitch. So that way it makes sense as to why I'm interested there. And then I guess, how can you ensure that the goals for yourself are heard? I think being honest with yourself and honest with the people that you're interviewing with about your goals, and making sure that you have in some way vocalized those goals is probably the best way to make sure that they're heard. Because if you have a very clear goal for yourself, but you don't say it out loud, they may not know that that is your goal, and they may not address it at all.
Yeah, I don't know that it probably, for better or for worse, consciously honed an elevator pitch until I was doing elevator pitches. So there was a little bit of like, it definitely got more honed as I went around talking to different people. That being said, I do think that if you're a little bit conscientious about how you craft your cover letter, that is sometimes the foundation of kind of what your pitch will be. In terms of marketing for academic jobs, I think that kind of what Kara was talking about, identifying, especially coming out of fellowship, identifying the people within the division or broader department that are going to be your collaborators is really important, because it helps kind of craft that story of like why you're there. So if you can say like, well, I really like this person's work and I could see how I could, we could work together and do X, Y, Z, like that's going to immediately kind of put people at ease and thinking about like, why is this person here?
One other thing, just to jump on something that you said, John, is that sometimes your elevator pitch comes around very naturally. If you're at a conference and you're meeting people and you're trying to network, you'll find that you're saying the same little blurb about yourself to everybody that you meet, and that will essentially become your elevator pitch. And so that is when you can be working on it. Anytime you're meeting a new person and telling them anything about yourself, you may not have that last little bit about how you can do some like contribute to the division, because you're not necessarily talking about a job, but that can really be a good opportunity for you to practice crafting your story and making sure that you're coming across the way that you want to come.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also practice with some of my friends and family who are not in medicine, because I think sometimes we tend to say things in a way that like other people in medicine we assume they understand, or use sort of all these words that we don't really need to use to describe what we're interested in, who we are. And so it was helpful to hear some feedback from friends who are in business or law or just other fields that might have some feedback about the way I constructed my elevator pitch. Um, and then I think this was said before, but I echo the sentiment about just really honing in on the goals that you have for yourself. I can't like stress that enough, because I think this job process, one of the biggest differences is that this is all you and what you want. Yes, you have to get an offer at some point to accept the job, but where you're choosing to apply and where you're choosing to look is all your choice. And it's different than going through like a match process, or being somewhere for only 3 years for training. This potentially could be your career spot, or at least the start of your career spot. And so it's just really important to like, I did a lot more journaling than I've probably ever done in my life in this job search process. And that looked a little different every day. Sometimes I would make lists of things I wanted or where I saw myself, and not just like the actual job itself, but even the environment, the city, day to day, what I would be doing. And that changed as well as I went through like the beginning of third year doing those pretending or like acting attending rotations. I would think about, oh, I really don't like that I have to do XYZ in this role every day when I get my job. I don't want that. And I would add to my list and edit it and adjust it. And so when it came time to sit down with potential employers, I could be confident and clear in what I was looking for. And that helped them say, okay, we know what she's looking for. We know what kind of job she wants. And we do have this, or we don't have that.
I was also just going to add for academia versus private practice. So I did basic science research. And so the question, how I marketed myself was very different. For academic places, it was easy. I just talked about basic science research and what I was good at. But then in private practice, it's not, I made it clear that I didn't intend to have a lab or want to continue. Sorry, we're just exiting the rental car place. I made it clear that I wasn't expecting to have a lab or protected time, because that's not what private practice is looking for. So just be smart about marketing yourself. And I didn't feel disingenuous about that either, because I feel like there's multiple facets of myself as a neonatologist too. So just be smart and know your audience in terms of crafting your marketing pitch.
Thank you, everyone. The next two questions focus on the job talk. What is the most important part of the job talk, and any advice for job talk success? Oops.
I mean, my advice would be like practice, practice, practice as much as you can, and try to get feedback from people who listen to job talks all the time. And I thought the most important part of the job talk for me was for me to get across what my scholarly interests were and how I felt like I could continue doing them at that institution. Because that was my goal, is that I wanted to continue doing my scholarly interests there. So I wanted to make it very clear, this is what I've been successful with so far. This is what I would love to do, to continue doing in the future. This is how I see myself doing it. And I also did include some like fun things about myself too, to make it so that way people who I didn't get to meet in an interview were able to learn a little bit about myself, and it wasn't just completely like dry job talk information. I had some other like fun slides sprinkled in.
I think that crafting a cohesive story about like the things that you've done, even if they don't necessarily mend together, like find ways to say like and like this, work influenced my research on XYZ, which has influenced XYZ, so that it feels like an arc and not just like you've jumped around, which let's be honest, like a lot of us jumped around in fellowship, right? But you like just like make an arc and then kind of let people envision how that arc might keep going. And like the other thing is just really knowing everything that's on that, anything that's on the slide or anything that's talked about, know it inside and out, because people will come up with some pretty esoteric questions.
Also, when you practice, pay attention to the questions that you keep from the audience with familiar people, because you can craft slides as question slides at the end, and people love that you prepared for the questions that they're probably going to ask you. I think I got like a fist pump from somebody when I pulled up the exact question slide of the question they asked me. So that's something that I think can only benefit your job talk.
I didn't give a job talk, so I can't speak to that personally, but I will say what we've done in our program here has started to ask our fellows to give the job talks to our division. And I think it's been helpful. I guess I'll let them tell you themselves, but it was helpful for me to hear from them. And I think it would have been nice if I had to give one, to at least present to an environment that I knew and people that I knew first, and in a formal way, and like having people in the division ask questions and give you those ideas of what other people might ask would be helpful. And so thinking about asking your program directors or some of your team of mentors, et cetera, to like sit down with you and go through it is really helpful.
Great, thank you. And then our last few questions have to do with the interviews. So I'll just clump 2 and 2 together. So what type of questions should be asked? Is there something that should not be asked? Are there standard interview questions? And I know we had talked about just not having any questions at all. Is there anything you wished you asked?
I think one thing that I didn't really grasp until I started going through the interview process was, especially for academic and private positions, really drilling down on how much you're actually working, because there's a lot of hand waving that gets done. But like drilling down, like, okay, so I'm doing X number of service weeks, and like how many calls a month am I going to have? And like sometimes looking at an example schedule of like a young faculty person is useful. But like there's a lot of like 80%, 70% FTE, yada, yada, yada. But like FTEs are different. And that's not something that I ever really thought about, because you don't think about that during fellowship. But there's no standard definition for an FTE. So drilling down exactly how much time you're going to work, because that's going to be a really important part of your day-to-day life moving forward.
One of the questions I asked for my private practice interviews was similar to what John was saying, to kind of get a sense of what the work day would be like. And I would ask about like people's commute, like where they lived in the area, what they were expected to cover. Every private practice has a different model. And so for some, it was you're at this main hospital and at night you cover a different place, or some places you're covering multiple hospitals during the day. I would ask about what the team structure looked like. Are you working on your own? Do you have nurse practitioners, physician assistants? Do you have other neonatologists that you're there with? Sort of like getting a sense of what your actual day on the job would look like. For one of the interviews I did, I also got a chance to see them do like their sign out or like handoff patients. So I don't know if you necessarily need to ask to do that, but it was helpful for me to see, just get a sense of like what that time looked like, how they split responsibilities, shared work, handed off things. I thought it was like helpful to get a sense of what my day to day would actually be like.
Yeah, and I did reference that like Neonatology Solutions website a decent amount, and I would ask some of those questions like to the medical director because I felt like they would have a good sense of what like day-to-day life in the unit is like and what people are doing. And they usually have a very good finger on the pulse for what clinical faculty members are doing. And I am a clinical faculty member. And I also think that you can see a lot of the standard interview questions kind of on those lists, but really the types of questions that should be asked are the ones that you are the most interested in, and that will affect whether or not you want that job and whether or not you can envision yourself working there. As far as when is it appropriate to bring up salaries, in my experience, I didn't have to bring it up. It was brought up for me. And so I think that typically that is what happens, is that they will bring it up sometime during those in-person days. And if they don't bring it up, then I would say at the end of that day, whenever you're wrapping up with your division chief, I think it would be appropriate to say like who should I contact to discuss more details about like salary and benefits in this position. And the discussing work-life balance and job satisfaction came up very naturally in interviews. I feel like, especially in the in-person interviews, it came up very naturally. People wanted to talk about their work-life balance and their satisfaction with their job. And I think it really showed that people were satisfied when they could say, over the past so many years, we've only had like X amount of people leave, or most of the people who come stay, kind of what Angie talked about earlier. But I think that it often came up very naturally. I didn't find myself having to bring it up myself. Like, how do you feel like your work-life balance is? I think that sometimes I would ask about the culture in the NICU and the culture in the division, and the culture of education, because I'm very interested in medical education. And with those kinds of questions, people would often talk about like work-life balance and their job satisfaction.
One of the other ways I found to ask about work-life balance and was talking to the person who does the scheduling. At all of my interviews, I generally met someone who was doing the scheduling. They kind of already organized that. But that's a good person to sort of get a sense of like, how do they do the schedule, and like how do they decide like where people work, if they're assigning different units, or like those people were the ones who also would bring up to me like what the leave situation is there, or how they handle it if people leave or have to they are down a person and someone has to cover, how they handle like jeopardy or sick coverage. Like those were also kind of ways I found to maybe not ask directly, like, am I going to get called last minute to come in? But they sort of have a way of telling you, this is what the structure is like here. And then I would sort of dovetail those questions to other people, especially like junior faculty, and ask like, oh, have you had to, how does it work if someone has to get called in? And, are people, if things come up, are you able to adjust your schedule? And that sort of gave me a sense of how well people worked well together, and if they were willing to cover for each other, help each other out. And I think that was like kind of gave me an insight into that. The salary question, I agree with what Kara said. It kind of came up naturally for me most of the time. And even for some people, it came up in the like very that first interview. They kind of just gave me a general like sense. And then we got into the details once we got to the second interview. For one situation, with the private practice interview, I was actually talking with a recruiter and then also talking with the medical director. And so the recruiter is who I had the conversation with about a lot of the details of the salary and benefits and what the structure is like at that practice. And then with the medical director, it was kind of like a very brief overview generally of what we would be paid and how that changes over the years. So you might be having that conversation with like two different people depending on what their hiring process is like.
Yeah, echoing some points about making sure you take advantage of getting time to talk with the junior attendings in the group or in the faculty, because I mean, I'll speak from direct experience. Like I don't have any like skin in, like, you know, like I'm not trying to hide secrets here. Like if you ask me something, I'm gonna be pretty straightforward with you. I'm not like that. I'm not that far out of fellowship. I remember what this was like. I think a good question maybe to ask, and I think what you might get people talking is like asking about like what have been some pain points recently that have come up in division meetings, or just like kind of just to kind of get a sense of like a pulse in terms of what's going on within the division. The other thing to note when talking about salaries, and this is something that I didn't know about until I started interviewing, within the private practice structure, there's the salary, but then there's also bonus structures, and those can be quite significant. So just keep that in mind when you're having that discussion, that to understand if there is a bonus structure, how that would work, if there's a schedule to when you can, like if the bonuses increase over time, or and how they are determined.
Definitely agree with you guys as far as talking to junior faculty members. I think like that's who you're going to be. And so talking to them to figure out how their process was, especially if you are coming from another institution, or if you're coming from somewhere joining a private practice, trying to figure out how the most recent people who've joined, how was their transition? And because that can be really enlightening, and you're about to go through it.
And just piggybacking off that, I think one question I wish I could have asked a little bit more was, how is the orientation going to be structured? It didn't even cross my mind to ask that, but I think it would have saved me a lot of like unknown, like the anxiety of the unknown, had I asked that, just to know like, oh, it's going to be like 2 weeks of half patient led or something like that. And then in private practice, another thing that might be important to ask is, what is the partnership track like, if there's a partnership track? Some places I interviewed, it was a little bit murky, and I took that as maybe kind of a red flag. And some places it was very clear, which I appreciated more.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. That concludes all the questions that were mostly brought up. We had just kind of separated them into groups. So I appreciate everyone's advice and insight. If there's any last comments or anything from anyone, please feel free to share. I'm actually going to share the evaluation in the chat right now, so everyone has that. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much. And everyone will have the emails and everything on your slide, so we'll be able to reach out to you, but we appreciate all of you being here.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Good luck.
Awesome. Thanks, Tanisha.
Thank you.
I hope that you have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks.
And don't
You
forget
too,
to stop
Nicole.
recording.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'll do that right now, actually.